what is the difference between a variable and an expression? Give an example of each. Well, when we think of a variable and an expression, we know that there's certainly a relationship between these two, but let's go back and think about the actual definitions that we were given for each of these. So let's start off with what a variable is. If we go back into our text, and there's nothing wrong with that as we think about this, to think about, okay, what exactly was the definition? So the definition that was given to us for a variable. So a variable, the book told us, is a symbol. And the kinds of symbols that we have been using primarily are letters from the alphabet. But a variable is a symbol which represents a quantity that can vary. Okay, so that's what we mean when we talk about a variable. It's standing in for a number that we don't know. Okay? Or a number that can change from problem to problem. And we've seen lots and lots of examples of that. And so if we're thinking of examples of a variable, so an example could be, x, and why would that be a value that could vary? Well, maybe it's just a number that I don't know. We could also use the letter A, we could use capital letter P, we could use any letter as a symbol to represent a quantity that can vary. Okay, so that's the idea of a variable. Now, what's an expression? Well, again, if we go back into our text, it's always a good idea to go back to say, what was the actual definition that was given to us for this? So, an expression, the book tells us, is a constant, a variable, oh wait, there's the variable word, variable, or a combination of constants, variables, operation symbols, and grouping symbols, such as parentheses. Okay, so that's the definition that we're given for an expression. So let's think about, well, what does this mean? So an expression can be just a constant, just the number, like the number 12. 12 is an example of an expression. It's a constant. An expression can also be just a variable, as they told us. We could just use x, would be an example of an expression. Now, that's not a very interesting one, but that does fit the definition. The definition says it could be a variable. So a variable could be an expression. But this is where we start getting a little bit more interesting, is when we start thinking about them as a combination of constants and variables and operation symbols. So if we think of 12 plus x, that would be an example of a combination. We've got a constant, we've got a variable, and we've got an operation sign going on. We could also think of something like 5 plus, and let's throw, 5 plus, and let's throw in a parenthesis, because they tell us it can have parentheses in it, y minus 3, something like that. So those would be examples of expressions. So the difference is that an expression has lots more room in it than a variable. A variable is just a single symbol which stands for a quantity that can vary. In an expression, we can have variables, but we can have lots of other things that talk about the interaction of variables and constants using our different mathematical operations.